Kate Morrison had been walking through the red valleys of Kelrath Prime for 3 hours when she saw the ships. They came down from the sky like black birds, blocking out the double suns that hung overhead. She knew immediately that something was wrong. Survey teams were supposed to be safe in this sector. The treaty had guaranteed it. She reached for her communication device, but the signal was dead. Someone was jamming the frequencies. Kate started running toward the rocky outcrops where she might find cover, but the ships were faster. They landed in a circle around her, kicking up dust and small stones. The engines made a sound like thunder, and Kate had to shield her eyes from the dirt. When the ramps lowered, soldiers came out. They were Zorathians, tall reptilian beings with scales that shimmered green and gold in the sunlight. Each one stood at least 7 feet tall, carrying weapons that hummed with energy. Their eyes were cold and yellow, with vertical pupils that fixed on her like a predator watching prey. The commander stepped forward. His scales were darker than the others, almost black with silver markings that showed his rank. He looked at Kate the way someone might look at an insect. "Human," he said in perfect standard language. "You are under arrest for violation of Imperial space." Kate kept her hands visible and tried to stay calm. "This is neutral territory. Check your charts." The Federation and the Empire agreed on these boundaries 5 years ago. The commander made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Boundaries change. The Empire has expanded its protection zone. You are now in restricted space. I'm a civilian surveyor. I'm not armed. I'm just doing agricultural research. You are a human," the commander said. "That is enough." They put restraints on her wrists, heavy metal bands that locked with a click. 2 soldiers grabbed her arms and pulled her toward the nearest ship. Kate tried to dig her heels into the ground, but it was useless. They were too strong. As they forced her up the ramp, Kate looked back at the valley. In the distance, she could see the small settlement where she had been working. The Kelrathi lived there, refugees who had lost their homes when the Empire expanded into their territory. Kate had been teaching them how to grow crops in the difficult soil, how to irrigate with limited water. The children would wave to her every morning when she arrived. Now she would not be coming back. The inside of the ship was cold and metallic. They took her to a small holding cell and locked the door. Kate sat on the narrow bench and tried to think. Earth was 3 months away by standard drive. Her team would not notice she was missing for at least a day. By then she could be anywhere. The ship lifted off, and Kate felt the familiar pull of acceleration. Through the small window in the cell door, she could see Kelrath Prime growing smaller below them. Then they jumped to faster than light speed, and the stars stretched into lines. 3 days later, they arrived at a space station. Kate was transferred to another ship, this one even larger. No one would tell her where they were going. The guards brought her food twice a day, but would not answer her questions. She tried to count the days, scratching marks on the wall with her fingernail, but after the 3rd transfer, she lost track. Finally, they brought her to a courtroom. It was a massive chamber carved from dark stone with high ceilings that made her feel tiny. Hundreds of beings filled the seats, all of them watching her. Most were Zorathian, but she saw other species too. Some she recognized, others she did not. They made her stand in a circle of light while a judge spoke. He was old. His scales faded to gray, his voice deep and rumbling. He read charges in a language Kate did not understand, then switched to standard. The human known as Kate Morrison stands accused of espionage, trespassing in Imperial space, and conspiracy to undermine Zorathian authority. How does the accused respond? Kate had no lawyer, no one to speak for her. She stood alone in the circle of light. "I'm not a spy. I was doing agricultural work in neutral territory. I never crossed into Imperial space." The judge looked at her with ancient eyes. "The Empire's borders are where the Empire says they are. Ignorance is not a defense. Then let me contact my government. Let Earth know where I am. That is not necessary. Your presence in our space is proof enough of your intentions." The trial lasted less than an hour. Witnesses spoke, though Kate never saw their faces or heard their voices clearly. They claimed she had been mapping military installations, photographing troop movements, meeting with rebel groups. All lies, but no one seemed to care about the truth. When the judge announced the verdict, his voice echoed through the chamber. "Guilty on all charges. The human will be sentenced to indefinite imprisonment at the Blackstone Fortress. Let this serve as a warning to all who would challenge the Empire's sovereignty." They took her away before she could speak. The guards were not rough, but they were not gentle either. They simply moved her along like a piece of cargo, through corridors and checkpoints until they reached another ship. The Blackstone Fortress was not a building. It was an entire asteroid, hollowed out and converted into a prison. As their ship approached, Kate could see weapons platforms and defensive shields surrounding it. This was a place built to hold the most dangerous criminals in the Empire, and now she was going to be one of them. Inside, the fortress was dark and cold. The walls were rough stone, barely finished, with lights set into the ceiling at long intervals. Kate was processed by silent guards who took her clothes and gave her a gray uniform. They scanned her, photographed her, and entered her information into their systems. Then they took her deep into the asteroid, down corridors that twisted and turned until Kate lost all sense of direction. Finally, they stopped at a heavy door made of solid metal. One guard entered a code and the door slid open with a grinding sound. The cell beyond was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. The walls were bare stone, 3 feet thick according to the guard who told her this with what might have been pride. There was a sleeping platform built into one wall, a waste facility in the corner and nothing else. No window, no screen, no way to tell day from night. They pushed her inside and the door closed behind her. The sound of the lock engaging was final and absolute. Kate stood in the darkness and waited for her eyes to adjust, but there was no light to adjust to. The darkness was complete. She felt her way to the sleeping platform and sat down, her back against the stone wall. She was alone, buried inside an asteroid, in a prison built to hold beings far more dangerous than any human. No one knew where she was. Earth thought she was on a peaceful survey mission. Her team thought she was doing field work. The Zorathians had made her disappear as if she had never existed. Kate put her head in her hands and allowed herself one moment of despair. Then she pushed it away. She was human, and humans did not give up. Somehow, some way she would survive this. She would find a way out, or someone would find her. She had to believe that. What Kate did not know, could not know in that moment, was that someone was already planning to find her. Not a military rescue team or a diplomatic mission. Not a commando unit or a spy network. 6 small children with fur and claws and hearts too big for their little bodies. 6 cubs who remembered the kind human who had brought them food and taught them games, who had called them by name and made them feel safe. They were coming for her. And nothing in the galaxy, not stone walls or space itself, would stop them. The news reached the refugee camp 2 days after Kate disappeared. A Federation courier arrived with official notification that a human surveyor had been detained by the Zorathian Empire. The message was brief and formal, offering no details about charges or location. It simply stated that diplomatic channels were being explored. The Kelrathi adults gathered in the meeting hall and spoke in worried voices. They knew what Zorathian justice meant. Once the Empire decided someone was guilty, that person rarely came back. Some of the elders said they should accept this loss and move on. Others wanted to protest to the Federation to demand action. But they all knew the truth. The Kelrathi had no power in galactic politics. They were refugees, displaced and forgotten. The children listened from outside the meeting hall, their large ears picking up every word. Pip, the oldest of the group at barely 4 seasons old, felt something burning in her chest. It was not fair. Kate had helped them when no one else would. She had shown them how to grow food so they would not go hungry. She had taught them songs from Earth and played games with them during the long, hot afternoons. That night, Pip gathered the others in the small shelter they shared. Her brothers Tuck and Ren were there, along with their cousins Lyra, Moss, and Little Gem. They sat in a circle on the dirt floor, and Pip spoke in a whisper. "The adults will not save Kate," she said. "They are too afraid of the Empire." Tuck nodded, his small face serious. "The Empire is strong. What can we do?" "We can go get her," Pip said. The others stared at her. Moss laughed, thinking it was a joke. But when Pip did not laugh back, his smile faded. "Go get her?" Lyra repeated. "We are children. We do not even know where she is." "The Blackstone Fortress," Pip said. "I heard the adults talking. That is where the Empire keeps prisoners." Ren shook his head. "That place is far away, very far. It would take months to get there, even if we knew the way." "Then we learn the way," Pip said firmly. "Kate never gave up on us. We will not give up on her." Little Gem, who rarely spoke, looked up at Pip with wide eyes. "I want to help Kate, that settled it." Even though they were young, even though they were small and weak compared to the other species, they would go. They spent the next 3 days preparing in secret. They stole food from the supply tent, taking only small amounts so no one would notice. They found an old navigation device that one of the traders had thrown away. Its screen cracked but still working. Tuck, who was clever with machines, managed to get it running again. The hardest part was figuring out how to leave the camp without being seen. The adults watched them during the day, making sure they stayed safe. But at night, the camp was dark and quiet. On the fourth night, when both moons were hidden behind clouds, the 6 cubs slipped away. They walked through the darkness, following the path toward the spaceport 10 miles away. Their feet were tough from going barefoot, but the ground was rocky and they stumbled often. Jem was too small to keep up, so Tuck carried him on his back for part of the way. By dawn, they reached the spaceport. It was not like the big ports on civilized worlds. This was a frontier facility, just a cleared area with landing pads and a few warehouses. Ships came and went without much oversight. The cubs hid behind cargo containers and watched the workers loading freight. "We need to get on a ship," Pip said. "One that is going toward the Empire's core systems." "How do we know which ship?" Lyra asked. Moss pointed to a large freighter that was being loaded with containers. "That one. I heard the workers say it is going to the mining colonies." "Is that the right direction?" Wren asked. Pip checked the broken navigation device. The screen flickered, but she could see the star maps. "Yes, the mining colonies are closer to where we need to go." They waited until the workers took a break for their meal. Then they ran across the open ground and climbed into one of the containers. It was half full of machine parts, leaving just enough room for 6 small bodies to squeeze inside. They pulled the door closed behind them, leaving it open just a crack so they could breathe. Hours later, they felt the container being lifted and moved. The motion made Jem feel sick, but he did not cry. They heard shouting and mechanical sounds, and then everything tilted as the container was loaded onto the ship. More waiting, more darkness, and then the deep rumble of engines starting up. The ship lifted off, and the cubs held onto each other as the acceleration pushed them against the back wall of the container. When the pressure eased, they knew they were in space. For 2 weeks, they lived in that container. They ate their stolen food slowly, making it last. They drank from bottles they had brought, rationing every drop. The ship was cold, and they huddled together for warmth, their fur providing some protection but not enough. Worst was the boredom and the fear. They could not risk making noise, so they whispered to each other or said nothing at all. Pip told them stories that Kate had shared about Earth and its animals. Tuck described the machines he would build someday. Lyra sang quiet songs from their homeworld. When the ship finally docked, they waited until they heard the workers leave for the night. Then they slipped out of the container and found themselves in a massive cargo bay. Ships of all sizes filled the space, being loaded and unloaded by automated machines. "We need to find another ship," Pip said, "one going deeper into Empire space." They lived in the cargo bay for 3 days, hiding in maintenance tunnels and stealing scraps of food from the workers' meal stations. Moss got caught once by a security drone, but he was small enough to squeeze through a ventilation grate and escape. They learned to move in the shadows to avoid the cameras to time their movements with the shift changes. Finally, they found another ship heading in the right direction. This one was smaller, a transport vessel carrying mining equipment. They hid in the equipment bay, wedging themselves between massive drills and excavation tools. This became their pattern: travel on a ship, hide until it docked, find the next ship going closer to their destination. Sometimes they went days without proper food. Sometimes they nearly got caught. Once, Lyra fell while climbing through a ventilation shaft and broke her arm. Pip said it as best she could, using pieces of cloth torn from their clothes as a splint. Jem grew thin and weak. Tuck developed an infection in his paw from a cut that would not heal properly. But they kept going, driven by something stronger than fear or pain. They were going to save Kate, no matter what it cost them. 6 weeks after leaving the refugee camp, they finally reached the sector where the Blackstone Fortress was located. They stowed away on a supply ship that was making a delivery to the prison. As they hid in the cargo hold, they could see through a small window as the massive asteroid came into view. It was bigger than Pip had imagined, a mountain of dark stone hanging in space. Weapons platforms surrounded it and patrol ships moved in regular patterns. The fortress looked impossible to breach, a place designed to keep people in and everyone else out. "How will we get inside?" Wren whispered, his voice shaking. Pip looked at the asteroid and thought about everything Kate had taught them. She had told them that humans believed in finding another way when the obvious path was blocked. She had said that sometimes the smallest creatures could go where the large ones could not. "We do not go through the front door," Pip said. "We go through the stone itself." The others looked at her as if she had gone mad. But then Moss understood. "We dig," he said slowly, "like our ancestors did on the homeworld." "The stone will be too hard," Lyra said, cradling her broken arm. "Then we dig slowly," Pip replied. "We dig until we reach her." When the supply ship docked, the cubs slipped away in the confusion of unloading. They made their way to the far side of the asteroid, where natural caves had been left untouched because the stone was unstable. Here, where no guards patrolled and no sensors watched, 6 small children began the impossible task of digging through solid rock to reach a prison cell deep inside. Their claws were small but sharp. Their determination was stronger than stone. And somewhere in the darkness ahead, Kate Morrison waited in her cell, alone but not forgotten. The caves on the far side of the asteroid were dark and silent. Water had once flowed through these passages, millions of years ago, carving channels through the stone before the asteroid had been captured by the prison's gravitational stabilizers. Now the caves were dry and cold, filled with sharp rocks and narrow passages that twisted deep into the heart of the asteroid. Pip led the others carefully through the entrance. They had no lights, afraid that any glow might attract attention from patrol ships passing nearby. Instead, they relied on their natural senses. Kelrathi had evolved in burrow systems on their homeworld, and their eyes could see in almost complete darkness. Their whiskers could detect air currents, and their sense of smell helped them map the spaces around them. "This way," Pip whispered, following a passage that led deeper into the asteroid. "We need to go toward the center. That is where the prison cells are." They moved slowly, testing each step before putting their full weight down. The stone was unstable here, just as the prison builders had feared. Sometimes rocks would shift under their feet, or small pieces would break away from the ceiling. Little Jem whimpered when a stone fell close to him, but Tuck put a paw on his shoulder to steady him. After an hour of careful climbing, they reached a dead end. The passage opened into a small chamber, maybe 20 feet across, with walls of solid stone. Pip examined the rock, running her claws across the surface. It was rough and layered, the kind of stone that could be worked with patience. "We dig here," she announced. "This direction should take us toward the prison." The others gathered around, looking at the wall. It seemed impossible. They were 6 small children with nothing but their claws and their determination. But they had come too far to turn back now. Pip organized them into teams. Tuck, Wren, and Moss would dig first, while Pip, Lyra, and Jem rested. After a few hours, they would switch. This way, they could work around the clock without stopping. The first 3 took positions at the wall and began to scratch at the stone. Their claws, which looked blunt and soft, were actually harder than they appeared. The tips could extend and retract, and when fully extended, they could chip away at rock. It was slow work, measured in inches rather than feet, but it was work. The sound of claws on stone filled the chamber, a steady scratching that echoed off the walls. They worked in silence except for the occasional grunt of effort. After 3 hours, they had created a shallow depression in the wall, barely deep enough to fit a fist. "My turn," Pip said, and the diggers moved aside. She, Lyra, and Jem took over, attacking the stone with fresh energy. Lyra could only use one arm because of her broken limb. But she worked as hard as the others, scraping with her good paw until blood seeped from beneath her claws. Time lost all meaning in the darkness. They worked and rested, measuring their progress by the depth of the tunnel they were creating. After what might have been 2 days, they had dug 3 feet into the wall. After a week, they had gone 10 feet. The work was brutal. Their paws became raw and bleeding. The stone dust got into their lungs and made them cough. They had to dig carefully, shoring up the tunnel with loose rocks to prevent it from collapsing on them. Once, a section did collapse, trapping Moss under a pile of stone. The others dug him out frantically, finding him bruised but alive. Their food was running low. They had brought enough for the journey to the asteroid, but not for weeks of hard labor. Pip rationed what remained, giving the larger portions to Tuck and Wren since they were doing the heaviest work. Jem got less than the others because he was smallest and he grew weaker each day. "I am fine," he would insist when the others worried about him. "Keep digging." The stone changed as they went deeper. The natural rock of the asteroid gave way to processed material, the molecular bonded stone that the prison builders had used to reinforce the structure. This was much harder, and their progress slowed to inches per day. Tuck's right front paw became infected. The cut he had gotten weeks ago during their journey had never properly healed, and now it was swollen and hot to the touch. He tried to hide it, but Pip noticed him favoring the other paw. "You need to rest," she told him. "We cannot afford rest," Tuck replied. "We are so close," but they were not close. They had no way of knowing how far they still had to go. The navigation device had stopped working days ago, its broken screen finally giving up completely. They were digging blind, hoping they were going in the right direction, praying they would not miss Kate's cell entirely. Moss developed a cough that would not go away. The stone dust had damaged his lungs and every breath rattled in his chest. Still, he took his turn at the wall, clawing at the unyielding stone until his paws bled. 2 months into their digging, they hit a pocket of harder stone that resisted all their efforts. For 3 days, they made almost no progress. Their claws broke against it, and they had to wait for new growth before they could continue. The cubs huddled together in the small space they had created, exhausted and hungry, wondering if they had failed. "Maybe we should go back," Lyra said quietly. "Maybe we should tell the adults where Kate is and they can help. By the time we get back and they organize a rescue, it will be too late," Pip said. "If they even try. We are the only ones who can save her." "But what if we cannot reach her?" Wren asked. "What if we dig for months and never find her cell?" Pip had no answer to that. She only knew that they had to try. Kate would not have given up on them, and they would not give up on her. On the 3rd day, Tuck discovered that the hard stone had a weak point near the bottom. By digging underneath it, they were able to create a crack that spread upward. The hard section broke away in chunks and they could continue. Inside her cell, Kate had lost all track of time. The darkness was absolute and endless. She exercised to maintain her strength, running in place until her legs burned, doing push-ups until her arms shook. She recited every poem she could remember, solved complex math problems in her head, and tried to hold on to her sanity. The Zorathians fed her once per day, sliding a tray of food through a slot in the door. The food was tasteless but nutritious. Sometimes she tried to talk to the guards when they came, asking questions, making jokes, saying anything just to hear a voice other than her own. They never responded. She had been in the cell for what she estimated was 3 months when she first heard the sound. It was so faint that she thought she had imagined it, a product of her isolation. But the next day she heard it again, a scratching sound, rhythmic and persistent, coming from the back wall of her cell. Kate pressed her ear against the cold stone and listened. The sound was definitely there. Something was moving on the other side of the wall. Her first thought was that the Zorathians were digging a new section of the prison. Her second thought was that they were setting charges to execute her. But then she remembered something from her training. Prisoner communication techniques. If someone was digging toward her, they might be trying to help. She grabbed her metal food tray, the only object in her cell besides the sleeping platform, and tapped it against the wall. 3 short taps, 3 long, 3 short. The old distress signal from Earth. The scratching stopped. Kate held her breath, waiting. Then the scratching resumed, faster and more intense than before. Someone was coming for her. Kate felt hope bloom in her chest for the first time in months. She did not know who was on the other side of that wall or how they had found her, but they were there. She was not alone anymore. She began helping from her side, using the edge of her food tray to chip away at the stone. The metal was not as effective as proper tools, but she worked with desperate energy, scraping until her hands were raw. The days that followed were the longest and shortest of her life. Long because progress was measured in fractions of inches. Short because every moment brought her closer to freedom. She could hear the diggers working on the other side, and she matched their rhythm, scraping when they scraped, resting when they rested. Sometimes she heard voices, high and soft, speaking in a language she recognized. Kelrathi, the cubs, they had come for her. Kate did not know whether to laugh or cry. Children, small children, had traveled across space and were digging through solid stone to rescue her. The thought was both wonderful and terrible. "I am here," she called through the stone, not knowing if they could hear her. "Keep going." "I am right here." The scratching continued day after day, week after week, and then finally she felt the stone give way beneath her scraping. A small piece broke through, creating a hole no bigger than her finger. Light flickered on the other side, weak but there. Kate pressed her face to the hole and looked through. She saw a golden eye staring back at her in the dim light of a chemical glow stick. Soft voice? came a small, tired voice. "We come for you. Pip?" Kate whispered, recognizing the voice. "Oh my God, Pip, is that you?" "Yes," Pip replied, her voice shaking with exhaustion and relief. "It is me. Tuck and Ren are here. Lyra, Moss, and Jem, too. We all came." Kate felt tears running down her face. She could barely process what she was hearing. These children, these tiny brave children, had somehow crossed the galaxy and dug through solid stone to reach her. "How did you find me? How did you even get here?" "We heard the adults talking," Pip said through the small hole. "They said you were at Blackstone Fortress. So we came, but that's impossible. You're just children. The journey alone would take months." "3 months," Tuck's voice came from somewhere behind Pip. "We hit on cargo ships. And we have been digging for 3 more months," Pip added. "We did not give up." Kate pressed her hand against the wall, wishing she could reach through and touch them. "You should not have done this. It is too dangerous. You could have died. You helped us when we needed help," Pip said simply. "Now we help you." Kate wiped her eyes and tried to focus. They had done the impossible to get here, but they were not safe yet. Okay, we need to make this hole bigger. Can you dig more?" "Yes, but slowly. The stone is very hard here. I will help from my side. Let me try to widen it." Kate went back to work with her food tray, attacking the edges of the small hole. On the other side, she could hear the cubs digging as well, their claws scraping against the resistant stone. She worked until her hands bled, then wrapped them in strips torn from her uniform and kept going. Hours passed. The hole grew slowly, inch by inch. Kate could see more through it now, glimpses of the small tunnel beyond and the cubs working in the dim light. They looked terrible, thin and dirty and exhausted, their fur matted with stone dust and dried blood. "When did you last eat?" Kate asked during a rest break. 2 days ago, Pip admitted. "We ran out of food." Kate felt her heart clench. "And water?" "We have a little. Not much." "Listen to me," Kate said firmly. "As soon as we get this hole big enough, you need to eat first." "I have some food in here. Not much, but more than nothing." "We are fine," Pip insisted. "We just need to get you out." But they were not fine. Kate could hear it in their voices, see it in their movements through the hole. They were at the edge of their endurance, running on nothing but will and determination. They worked through what Kate guessed was the night, though time had no meaning in the prison. The guards came once to deliver her food, and Kate held her breath, afraid they would notice the scratching sounds. But the guard just shoved the tray through the slot and left without looking. As soon as the footsteps faded, Kate grabbed the tray and started scraping again. The hole was now the size of her fist, big enough to pass small objects through. She pushed half of her food ration through to the other side. "Eat," she ordered. "All of you." That is not a request. She heard them dividing the food among themselves, soft voices arguing about who should get what, then silence as they ate. It was not enough, Kate knew. They needed real food and medical attention and rest. But it would have to do for now. They dug for another full day. Kate's hands were raw and bleeding despite the wrappings. Her muscles screamed from the repetitive motion. But she kept going because the cubs kept going, and she would not let them work alone. Finally, the hole was large enough. It was maybe 18 inches across, barely big enough for Kate to squeeze through if she tried. She looked through it at the tunnel beyond. It was rough and narrow, shored up with loose rocks extending back into darkness. The cubs had dug this. 6 small children with nothing but their claws had carved a passage through solid stone. "I am going to try to come through," Kate said. "Move back and give me room." "Be careful," Pip said. "The tunnel is not stable." Kate took off her uniform jacket and pushed it through the hole first. Then she put her arms through and started pulling herself forward. The opening was tight, scraping her shoulders and hips. The stone caught on her clothes and skin. She ignored the pain and kept pulling. Her head and shoulders made it through. She twisted her body, trying to get her hips to follow. The stone pressed in on her from all sides. For a terrible moment, she thought she might be stuck, trapped half in and half out of the cell. Then something gave way and she slid forward suddenly. Strong, small hands grabbed her arms and pulled. Kate scraped through the opening, leaving skin behind, and tumbled into the narrow tunnel on the other side. She lay there for a moment, gasping, then sat up and looked at the cubs in the dim light of the chemical stick. They looked worse than she had imagined. All 6 were thin to the point of starvation. Their fur was matted and dirty, and their paws were bloody and swollen. Lyra held one arm at an odd angle, clearly broken. Tuck's right paw was infected, the swelling visible even in the poor light. Moss was breathing with difficulty, each breath a struggle. And little Jem looked like a skeleton covered in fur, his eyes huge in his small face. Kate pulled them all into her arms, holding them as gently as she could. They pressed against her and she felt them shaking. "You brave, wonderful, impossible children," she whispered. "You saved me." "We are not done yet," Pip said, her practical nature showing through even in this moment. "We still need to get out." Kate nodded, forcing herself to think clearly. "You are right. How far is it back to the caves?" "Maybe 200 feet, Tuck said. "We have been digging for a long time. 200 feet of unstable tunnel with guards who would soon discover her missing, and 6 children who could barely stand." The odds were not good, but they were better than they had been an hour ago. "Okay," Kate said. "Here is what we are going to do. We move slowly and carefully. The tunnel might collapse if we rush. Pip, you lead since you know the way. I will bring up the rear and carry anyone who cannot walk." "I can walk," Jem said weakly. Kate looked at the tiny cub and made a decision. "I know you can, but you have been working hard and you deserve a rest. Let me carry you." She picked up Jem, who weighed almost nothing, and settled him on her back. He wrapped his small arms around her neck and rested his head on her shoulder. Kate could feel his heart beating fast against her back. "Everyone else, stay close together. If you hear anything or if the tunnel starts to shake, stop moving and call out. Understood?" They nodded and Pip turned to lead the way. They moved in single file through the narrow passage, crawling in places where the ceiling was too low to stand. The tunnel was exactly as unstable as Pip had warned. Rocks shifted under their weight and small pieces of stone fell from the ceiling. Kate's shoulders barely fit in some sections. She had to twist and squeeze, protecting Jem as best she could. The other cubs moved with more ease, their smaller bodies better suited to the tight spaces. They had gone maybe 50 feet when they heard voices. The sound echoed down the tunnel from the direction of Kate's cell. The guards had discovered her escape. "Move faster," Kate urged, trying to keep her voice calm. "But stay careful." The voices grew louder, angry and alarmed. Kate could hear boots on stone, heavy footsteps coming closer. The Zorathians would reach her cell and see the hole in the wall. They would follow. "Pip, how much farther?" Kate asked. "Maybe 100 feet. But there is a narrow section ahead." "Very tight," Kate made a quick calculation. The guards were bigger than her, which meant they would move slower through the tunnel. That gave them some time, but not much. "Keep going. Do not stop for anything." They crawled on faster now, accepting the risk of a collapse. Behind them, Kate heard the sound of large bodies entering the tunnel. The Zorathians were coming after them. The narrow section Pip had mentioned was barely wide enough for Kate to fit through. She had to push Jem through first, then squeeze through herself, her back scraping the ceiling and her stomach pressed against the floor. It took precious minutes and she could hear the guards getting closer. Finally, she emerged from the narrow section and saw light ahead. Real light, not just the glow stick. They were close to the caves, close to escape. "Run," Kate said. "All of you run." The cubs scrambled forward and Kate followed, still carrying Jem. They burst out of the tunnel into the cave system, where the ceiling was higher and they could finally stand upright. Kate looked around frantically, trying to orient herself. "This way," Pip called, already moving toward another passage. "This leads outside." They ran through the caves, the guards shouting behind them. Kate could see the entrance ahead, a patch of darkness against darker stone. Beyond it would be the surface of the asteroid, and beyond that, the void of space. They had no ship, no way to escape, but first they had to get out of the prison. Kate and the cubs burst out of the cave entrance onto the surface of the asteroid. The sight that greeted them was both beautiful and terrifying. Space stretched out in every direction, filled with stars that blazed without the filter of an atmosphere. The horizon curved sharply, reminding them they were on a small world. And everywhere, patrol ships moved in regular patterns, their searchlights sweeping the dark surface. "We need cover," Kate said, looking around desperately. "And we need a ship." "There," Tuck pointed with his good paw. "The service docks. We came past them when we arrived." Kate could see the docks in the distance, maybe half a mile away across the rough surface. Between them and the docks were open ground, sensor arrays, and patrolled zones. Behind them she could hear the guards emerging from the caves. "We have to risk it," she said. "Stay low and move fast. Follow me." They ran across the asteroid's surface, their feet crunching on loose rock. The gravity was light here, making each step a small leap. Kate kept Jem on her back and grabbed Lyra's good arm to help her along. The broken arm made the cub unsteady in the low gravity. A searchlight swept over them and Kate threw herself flat, pulling the cubs down with her. The light passed by without pausing, but Kate's heart was racing. They could not keep this up. They were too exposed. There are maintenance tunnels, Moss said, his voice rough from his damaged lungs, under the surface. For power lines and life support. Where? Kate asked. Moss pointed to a cluster of small buildings ahead. Access points near every major structure. If we can reach those buildings, we can go underground. They made for the buildings, running and hiding, timing their movements between searchlight sweeps. Kate's muscles burned from carrying Jem, but she did not slow down. Behind them, she could hear alarms starting to sound. The entire prison would be looking for them soon. They reached the buildings and found an access hatch just as Moss had described. Kate pulled it open, revealing a ladder leading down into darkness. Go, 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 she urged, and the cubs scrambled down. Kate went last, pulling the hatch closed behind her. The maintenance tunnel was narrow but tall enough to walk upright. Emergency lights provided dim illumination every 50 feet. Kate could see power conduits running along the walls and pipes carrying air and water throughout the prison complex. Which way to the docks? She asked. Pip closed her eyes, using the sense of direction that Kelrathi possessed. She pointed left. That way, maybe half a mile through the tunnels. They moved as quickly as they dared, Kate's hand on the wall to guide her in the dim light. The tunnels branched and intersected, but Pip seemed certain of the direction. Above them, they could hear the sound of running feet and shouting voices as the guards searched the surface. They emerged from the maintenance tunnels near the service docks. These were not the main landing bays where prison transports arrived, but smaller facilities where maintenance shuttles and supply ships were kept. Kate peered out from behind a stack of cargo containers, assessing their options. 3 shuttles were docked at the nearest pad. 2 looked like standard maintenance craft, small and slow. The third was larger, a transport shuttle with cargo capacity. That was what they needed. The problem was the guards. Even at this secondary facility, there were at least a dozen Zorathian soldiers visible, plus automated defenses and security systems. Kate was one unarmed human with 6 exhausted children. The odds were impossible, but then again the cubs had already done the impossible by reaching her. Okay, Kate said, thinking fast. I need a distraction. Something to draw the guards away from that transport shuttle. I can do it, Tuck said immediately. I know machines. I can trigger an alarm on the other side of the docks. No, Kate said. You are injured. Someone else. I can go, Wren offered. I am fast. Kate looked at the young cub and felt her heart break. He was offering to put himself in danger for her. They all were, without hesitation. Listen to me, she said. All of you. What you have already done is the bravest thing I have ever seen. You do not have to do more. Yes, we do, Pip said firmly. We came to rescue you. That means getting you home. We are not done yet. Kate realized she was not going to win this argument. These children had crossed the galaxy and dug through stone. They were not going to give up now. Fine, she said. But we do this smart. Wren, you create the distraction, but you do not take risks. You trigger the alarm and you run straight back here. Everyone else comes with me to the shuttle. We get it started, and the moment Wren is back, we launch. Agreed, they all nodded. Kate wished she had better options, a real plan, backup. But wishes would not help them now. She checked the area one more time, then nodded to Wren. The young cub took off, moving low and fast along the edge of the docking area. Kate watched him go, her stomach tight with worry. Then she focused on the shuttle, watching the guard patrols timing their movements. When the alarm went off on the far side of the docks, it was loud and insistent. Guards turned and ran toward the sound, shouting into their communication devices. The automated defenses swiveled their sensors in that direction. For a moment, the area around the transport shuttle was less defended. Now, Kate said, and they ran. She carried Jem and half-dragged Lyra, while Pip, Tuck, and Moss ran alongside. They covered the open ground in seconds and reached the shuttle's boarding ramp. Kate hit the emergency release and the ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics. They scrambled inside and Kate made for the pilot's seat. She had flown dozens of ship types during her training, but never a Zorathian transport. The controls were different, designed for larger hands and different sensory needs. She studied the panel quickly, identifying thrust controls, navigation, and life support. "Where is Wren?" Moss asked, looking out the hatch. Kate's hands moved over the controls, trying to start the engines. She found what she thought was the ignition sequence and entered it. Nothing happened. She tried again, modifying the sequence. Still nothing. "Security lockout," Tuck said, looking over her shoulder. "The shuttle knows it is not authorized crew. Can you bypass it?" Kate asked. Tuck's infected paw made it hard for him to work the controls, but he tried, his claws dancing over the panel. Sweat beaded on his forehead. "I think so. I need more time." "We do not have more time," Pip said. "The guards are coming back." Kate looked out and saw she was right. The guards had discovered the alarm was false and were returning to their posts. Worse, they had noticed the open shuttle. They were starting to run toward it, weapons drawn. "I see Wren," Jem called out. The small cub was running back across the docking area, but he was not going to make it before the guards reached the shuttle. "Got it," Tuck said suddenly, and the engines hummed to life. Kate did not hesitate. She grabbed the thrust controls and pushed them forward. The shuttle lurched off its docking clamps and rose into the air. Guards scattered as the craft swung around, its engines washing over them. "Wren is still out there," Pip shouted. "I know," Kate said through gritted teeth. She brought the shuttle down in a hover near where Wren was running. "Open the cargo door. Get ready to grab him." Moss hit the control and the side cargo door rolled open. The shuttle was moving forward now, matching Wren's speed. The young cub ran as hard as he could, his legs pumping. "Jump," Kate called out. "Wren, you have to jump." The cub pushed off the ground with all his strength. In the low gravity, he flew through the air toward the open door. Pip and Moss leaned out, their arms extended. For a terrible moment, Kate thought he would miss. Then Pip's claws locked onto his fur and they pulled him inside. "Close the door," Kate ordered, and she pushed the throttle to maximum. The shuttle accelerated hard, throwing them all against the back wall. Kate fought with the controls, pointing the nose up toward space. Alarms screamed as the prison's defense systems locked onto them. She saw weapons platforms tracking their movement, missiles launching from silos. Kate threw the shuttle into a hard turn, dropping behind a patrol ship to use it as cover. The missiles lost their lock and exploded harmlessly against the other ship's shields. She banked left, then right, weaving through the defensive perimeter with every bit of skill she had. Energy beams lanced through the space around them. One grazed the shuttle's hull and alarms added their voice to the chaos. Kate ignored them all, focused only on flying. She dropped into a debris field using the chunks of rock and metal as cover, her hands moving over the controls with desperate precision. Then they were through, past the defensive perimeter, accelerating away from the asteroid. Kate kept pushing the engines, knowing they needed distance before the prison could organize a proper pursuit. In the back, the cubs were picking themselves up, checking on each other. Kate risked a glance back and saw they were all there, all alive. "Battered and exhausted, but alive. Is everyone okay?" she called. "We are fine," Pip replied, though her voice shook. "Where are we going?" "Good question." Kate checked the navigation system. They were in deep Zorathian space, weeks away from the nearest Federation territory. The shuttle had fuel for maybe 3 days of travel at standard speed. Less if she kept running at maximum thrust, and the entire Zorathian fleet would be looking for them. "We head for the border," Kate decided, "and we hope we can stay ahead of pursuit long enough to reach neutral space." For 3 days,